Welcome to Drumbeats, the must-listen-to podcast which explains why Indigenous partnerships are the key to securing successful outcomes in natural resource and infrastructure investment in Canada. I'm Mark McNack and my co-host Robert Branton are joined today by Thomas Benjoe, Chief Executive Officer of Flowing River Capital. He brings a track record of Indigenous leadership recognized for advancing economic reconciliation, and his focus on creating opportunities for Indigenous people and future career pathways is to be recognized. Today, we're exploring how Indigenous-led private equity is transforming community wealth creation and what this means for investors seeking authentic partnerships in Canada.
Thomas Benjoe, CEO of newly formed Flowing River Capital. Welcome to Drumbeats. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, great to have you here, Thomas.
Thomas, before we jump in and talk about the new fund, I know it's been a busy summer. You launched earlier this summer, but let's first talk about your upbringing and your background. You've done a lot at a young age, but start with where you're from and the community you're from.
Sure. Well, Tama Takiape, Mininu Takiwe Chasha Makiape. So I'm Thomas Benjoe. I'm from Muscopeding First Nation, which is located here in Saskatchewan. And Ben sort of started off my career at First Nations University, had the opportunity to focus my education on Indigenous business and Indigenous governance. And that took me into the banking world where I worked as a commercial banker with RBC and served in a number of different responsibilities and helped to participate on a number of new initiatives, new lending opportunities for nations across the country. And that then took me into the opportunity to be CEO for a tribal council-owned investment firm based here in Saskatchewan, and had a very successful portfolio growth with very little investment, but was able to create quite a portfolio of companies that have been very successful here in Saskatchewan and Western Canada. So it's been great to be able to have that experience and now bring that into the world that we're now involved in private equity, and also served on a number of different boards, still serving on a number of boards, and including the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So trying to ensure that there's Indigenous and sort of economic reconciliation on the agenda of those organizations, so that we ensure that our nations are not forgotten about when we're talking about the economics of this country.
And for our listeners, especially those outside of Canada, explain a little bit about where your community is located.
Yeah, so we're right here in Regina, Saskatchewan. My community is actually just about 35 minutes outside of Regina. So very beautiful countryside, very flat. We could see a dog running for miles and miles away. So, but we're right along the valley as well. So very beautiful part of the country. And my family's been here for generations, and we are Dakota and Cree and Soto family. So we have a bit of a mix of different tribal affiliations here, but it's good to sort of have that experience from the different tribes in the territorial plains tribes, and we're able to bring, of course, a lot of those teachings into the work that we do as an organization.
Growing up, was there somebody or something that shaped your values? Was there a moment in time where you decided on the path of business and finance?
Yeah, well, it was I was actually raised by my grandfather. So he was a very hardworking farmer, and raised my brother and I. And so his work ethic is untapped. It's just he's constantly working on something. If he wasn't in the field, he was working on fixing things or helping in the community. So he really drove that sense of community responsibility into us as a family, and ensured that we earned everything that we gained within our family. And so I think just that work ethic from him, and he always put education first. He recognized that he wasn't able to get a more formal education, but he was going to ensure that his kids and his grandkids had the appropriate education. So he's probably my biggest mentor and person I looked up to the most. And from there, had the pleasure to be able to meet a significant amount of individuals just going through, post-secondary. And I've always wanted to be a CEO, an Indigenous CEO of an Indigenous firm, and be able to help community. And, things have shifted a little bit. And now that, I get to do this as an entrepreneur, and, and still focus on the things that, I value most, and being able to help within the community. So I get the best of both worlds in the role I'm in now.
It's amazing how often grandparents come up in our conversations, isn't it, Mark?
Yes, it certainly is. Big influence for everyone.
And you, Thomas, started out in the non-Indigenous business world, talked about RBC and other positions. What challenges did you face as an Indigenous business person in a non-Indigenous business world?
Well, I think I wouldn't say. Well, I guess there was challenges, but I think I was a bit more naive, sort of going into the banking world. I had a number of opportunities to work for several financial institutions, and just had sort of my pick of the litter of where I wanted to go. But it was actually a story that was told from someone from RBC that sort of caught my interest, and they spoke to me more about the impact that they were creating in the community, in working directly with First Nations and Métis communities, and supporting them with banking. Because I thought, well, we're open up some accounts, help with some lending, and hopefully things go well. But they spoke more about how do we help make change? How do we challenge the status quo of sort of what's happening, and how do we create more economic opportunities? So I always had that in the back of my mind, sort of going into RBC, and I didn't realize there were certain rules about, not reaching out to your more superior leaders within the organization. And I often found myself emailing, senior executive from time to time, just because I was curious about some of the strategies that they were embarking upon. So I think that helped to sort of highlight my interest in sort of supporting the institution, and supporting some of the strategy around how do we help more First Nations across the country? How do we remove some of the bottlenecks? And so I was able to be a part of some of the very early stages of the legal expense financing. Had the opportunity to influence some of the Indigenous engagement strategy with the executive team. And I think just, in that experience alone, allowed me to do something a little different. And I mean, the goal always was to try to help our communities. The initial goal was to make sure that they know how to access banking services, know how to leverage banking services to the best of their ability as a community. But the next sort of stage of growth was, how do we create economic opportunity where they actually have capital to access, to be able to go into investments? And so that's sort of where things started. And, being able to move into the career around Indigenous investment allowed me to get more into the weeds around, why are things not working? why do our communities struggle to find success in business? What are some of the policy factors that are affecting their ability to be successful in business? And so I think being in the weeds for a number of years and being able to work through some of those challenges has really opened my eyes to the things that we really need to start to focus on. And, we often create a lot more complexities around Indigenous participation in business when, the answers are already there. The business community has already been in this space for so long, but we continue to people are good intentioned, but sometimes they create rules and policies and programs that sometimes don't make sense and sometimes actually create more barriers for First Nations participation. And so, we have to be able to sort of work through and be, I would say just use more common sense around how we approach investment. And, when we think about investing on large scale, well, you need private equity, right? And that's the space we're in. And, there's not many of us in terms of, Indigenous private equity folks. And so it's our job to sort of trailblaze and pioneer in the space and make sure that we're educating people along the way so that we're not being given a set of rules that don't make sense. We need to be able to challenge some of those rules and make things a little easier so that future Indigenous fund managers will have a lot more success and not have as many challenges that we've had sort of getting started.
Just before we get into the discussion of Flowing River, you have a lot of operator experience.
Yeah.
Can you share with our listeners and viewers some of that? Because I'm sure they'll find that fascinating, the approach you took to grow Indigenous businesses in Saskatchewan and beyond.
Yeah, well, not having access to capital, and I think that's one of the more exciting things that adventure that we're on is that, now we're in a space where we can actually raise capital and have access to capital. But for the past number of years, I've done this without access to capital. The communities we worked with all committed to a $10 investment each. So that's 11 First Nations putting in $10 each. But being able to leverage relationships, being able to leverage and influence policy changes, being able to work through some of the government programming, as frustrating as it can be sometimes, we had to leverage everything that was at our fingertips. And so I think, just having good management teams was one of the critical components of us being successful, but also having patience. Because, working with First Nations, the social needs are often very, very high. And so a lot of our communities want instant cash flow as soon as we, invest in a new company or acquire. When, in the investment world, we know it's a bit of a buy and hold and allow that cash flow to grow and reinvest and continue to, make your capital programs work well and grow your teams, right? So you can grow and scale and continue to see success that way. So I think, just some of that operating experience, being boots on the ground, working through some of those challenges, being very strict about how we work and grow Indigenous capacity with my non-Indigenous partners was very critical for us to see that success. And so now being able to, again, bring it on to this side now where, we will have access to capital, plus we have the playbook in place that should ensure that we're a lot more successful, a lot quicker, and be able to hopefully model this for others, again, other, Indigenous investors in the future. Hopefully they'll be able to take that torch and run a lot further.
So can you also then tell the story of Flowing River Capital, how long it took you from idea to set up, some of the challenges along the way, and the story for other listeners to appreciate what you've been through?
Yeah, well, it's It's an interesting story. I mean, the four partners, we're actually all friends from university. We've all went to the same business school, University of Regina / First Nations University. So Cadmus and I, Cadmus Delorme, who's former chief of Cowes First Nation, very successful time spent as a chief, and really put a focus on economic opportunities for his community. We're best friends. We've actually been in student politics together and did a number of things over the years, but we're very, very close. Our families are very close. And we've always supported each other's careers as we've sort of gone along. And then we have Tyler Willix, who's one of the best originators in, I would say, in the province, and he's been able to work in the investment space as well, more on an M&A sort of focus, and has helped a number of organizations in Saskatchewan go public. So he has, some of that experience, and again, student politics brought us together while we were students. And then we have Eric Clark, who's our real technical private equity guy who comes from that space, who's worked his whole career there. And even as a student, he was a pretty astute investor, created the first investment club at the university, and has been very successful in that space. And so, he has all the technical capacity as our CFO, and, bringing the four of us together, bringing both the non-Indigenous side of their experience and their relationships that they have within community, and then bringing, Cadmus and I's more Indigenous focused experience into the space, I think is something that's very, very unique to our business model, and something that I don't see reflected in a lot of other organizations across the country. But having that close relationship over the years, and being able to sort of go out and experience and build careers, successful careers, and now coming back as partners. It's been a little over 2 years now that we've sort of been working on this, and it's always been an idea, but now being able to sort of fully move into the space, and doing it at a very interesting time in economics with all the things that are going on in the world has been interesting. But I think just with all of the changes and the focus on economic reconciliation, I think it's an absolute perfect time for us to say, look, this is a real time for us to stop assuming that Indigenous people don't have the capacity to do this. We do have the capacity. We just need that opportunity to demonstrate that we are here, and we can build successful companies as a people. And so having those right partners around the table allows us to do that. And it's been an exciting journey so far. And I mean, even without our fund, we've already made some investments and, started some other companies just to demonstrate that, we're a train that's moving, and we're not stopping. So we're not letting things slow us down. We just, keep finding ways to keep making more and more investments. And once the fund is fully up and rolling, we're going to have access to capital now to really unlock a lot of the other big opportunities we have in the pipeline.
Yeah, congratulations again on getting launched. It's, as you said, it's not an easy time, especially for first funds. Have you raised new money at this point, or is it the founders' capital that you're working with?
We do have commitments from several institutional investors. And so we're sitting at around 35 million raised. Our hope is to try to get to first close of 50 million. We were going to try to close more at 100 million, but I think closing at 50 million on our first close we'll be able to just immediately demonstrate, here's how successful of a portfolio or a pipeline that we have in place, and hopefully that will encourage more folks to come on board as we push to that 100 million mark. And like I said, the pipeline, the opportunities that are coming to us, these are, for most investment firms, would be considered rare gems, and for us, it feels like we're getting these rare gems on a pretty regular occasion. So it's been very exciting to see these types of opportunities sort of hit our desk.
What's the investment strategy? It sounds like it's not just passive investments.
The main thesis is to acquire companies that are in good alignment to the Indigenous procurement policies that exist across the country. There's billions of dollars in commitment that either governments, resource sector, utilities, service sector, they're all committing to economic reconciliation in some form. And the majority of those organizations have committed to a specific spend around Indigenous businesses. And so they're really looking at their supply chains. And so the model that I've always focused on has always been, well, how do we acquire good companies that are in those supply chains? I've out of sort of necessity, I've had to just create new companies based on the previous model, was creating new companies so that we can access those supply chains. But now, having access to capital, now we can actually just go out and buy very well-run companies, very well-managed companies, indigenize them, and bring our playbook into those organizations, and then go back out to market and share with our customer base that these companies that have already been in their supply chain, have already had tremendous success, are going to be indigenized overnight, and we are going to come back with a bit of a different approach on how we develop Indigenous capacity more strategically within those organizations. And I mean, I do get questions sometimes because folks think that we're going to come in and change 50% of the staff over to Indigenous people overnight, and I tell them that's not recommended. There is a good mixture of how we do that over time and build Indigenous capacity in those spaces, because a lot of these companies have very highly technical requirements, and so it takes a little bit of time for us to develop Indigenous talent well in that space. And there's been a recipe that has made those businesses successful to start out, and so you don't want to hurt that recipe too much, or mix in new ingredients that affects its ability to be successful as a business. We always got to focus on the business's success first, and work within those teams, work within the HR teams to develop the Indigenous capacity over time. That's always been sort of the focus, and it's been how I've approached growing Indigenous talent in other companies, and it's worked well for us. And I often tell our customers to have patience, because it's some of their expectations. It's just part of some of the policies that exist when they're going through RFPs. They expect you to have a very high percentage of Indigenous participation from staff, and sometimes that's not realistic. And I often tell my non-Indigenous leaders, I said, you leave that conversation to me, because they need to hear it from me that your expectations are unrealistic sometimes. So these are just some of the things, the challenges, from an operations perspective, that we often face as Indigenous businesses. And we sometimes forget about the end goal. It's the end goal here is to build successful Indigenous-owned businesses. And that doesn't necessarily mean, having a 50 or 100% Indigenous talent pool. It means, making sure that our values and our systems and our operations, our work culture, understands that they are working for an Indigenous organization, and that our values are really shining through.
And I think when you've brought up some of these primarily non-Indigenous firms, if I understand correctly, they also get access to new opportunities because they are Indigenous owned. So it's also an opportunity for growth for these firms who may have been very comfortable business, but restricted in terms of future growth. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's, one of the things that, our CFO has shared, when you would look at, traditional opportunities in private equity, the strategy when you're going in is, you take some equity ownership, you use some capital to help with some of the growth. And you just get, you build some more efficiencies in the business to try to churn a better value for the company. But in our case, we can actually grow top line revenue growth because we would be opening up the portfolio to new clients, new relationships, and we have a pretty significant relationship with several very large corporate organizations, with governments, and our network between the four of us is quite vast, and it's not difficult for us to be able to pick up the phone with an executive and be able to explain what it is that we're doing and what new companies we have that are participating in their supply chains, for us to be able to sort of navigate those waters a little quicker, rather than showing up with a brand new business and really having to pound pavement to try to get some new contracts. Those relationships are already established, and again, having the ability to buy companies that already have an established reputation of doing good work, it just enhances our ability to do more, and be able to negotiate differently on how we approach some of the opportunities with the clients.
And will you be looking at businesses across the prairies and beyond, or primarily Saskatchewan, or going north?
So a lot of our strength is in Western Canada, just given the companies that we currently work with. But there are opportunities right now in our pipeline where they are outside of the Prairie provinces. Obviously, you want to play to your strengths, especially as a new fund manager. But like I said, there are opportunities even outside of the Prairie provinces that we have access to. And, we do have a couple of investment opportunities that, go even beyond Canadian borders. And so very excited about those opportunities. And, as long as we can see that we're bringing tremendous value to that business, it's something that we'll likely pursue.
Is there a sector focus, Thomas, or is it broadly anything procurement related?
It's pretty broad, just because the procurement requirements, and obviously, because historically the sectors that have really been advancing Indigenous participation has been sectors like resource sector. And I often get this sometimes from some of the other fund managers when they ask about our participation in the resource sector. And of course, some of them have rules about participating in the resource sector. But I tell them it's you might want to rethink the policy there, because that is where participation started for Indigenous businesses. A lot of it is based out of some of the policies and the license to be able to do business in certain territories, right? So impact benefit agreements play a big part in Indigenous participation in the resource sector. And so those organizations have been in this space for a very long time. They've pioneered their own policies on Indigenous participation. So when we think about, well, who's the most mature sector that will be willing to support more Indigenous participation, it's going to be the resource sector. And then you're likely going to have government and utilities as sort of, your second line of sectors. And we're now starting to see more financial institutions, service type of organizations, manufacturing. You're starting to see them start to make some commitments around Indigenous participation. So, but everything right now, our greatest strength is in the resource sector. And so, again, we got to play to our strengths. And I think another one that's really emerging, and especially with the political climate, has been defense. But that, again, ties back to some of the federal government's commitment around the Indigenous spend.
You also have another initiative called One Hoop, which is a consulting firm. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So, when we formed Flowing River Capital, it wasn't actually the intention to go out and create a consulting firm. But when we started to sort of talk about what's actually happening in community, what's happening, across the country, and we looked at our sphere of influence as Indigenous leaders across the country, and how do we move the needle on economic reconciliation? How do we move the needle on building better relationships with Indigenous communities? And I think just the experience that both myself and Cadmus bring to the table, we're connectors. We've helped to connect some pretty significant relationships, and we've also influenced a lot of major policy changes across the country. I've been involved in the commitment with the federal government on the 5%. I was part of the team that got it across the finish line. And, Cadmus set some pretty unprecedented policies around child welfare, around some of the unmarked graves. And so we've had some sort of historical things that we've done in our past that have helped to move the needle. And so when we spoke about the work that needs to be done with, Indigenous private equity, we said, look, there's a lot of work and a lot of policy work that needs to continue to happen in order for that to be successful. And so the job there was, create a consulting firm that can go out there and influence the market and help to build a better understanding of why Indigenous engagement is so important for not only corporate, but for government, for our own communities to be able to participate, like being able to have some insight around some of the challenges that they're facing, and be able to build a team. And so we needed more, young people to have a place to hang their hat and be able to take some of the experience that we've gained as leaders and be able to run with that in the community and hopefully build them up as leaders. And it's a bit of a training grounds for them to start out there and hopefully come and participate in other parts of the business as we continue to invest in more and more companies and more industries. And so we felt that was really important, and it was meant to help to continue to move the needle and in terms of more active participation with whether it's Indigenous community or ourselves in economic opportunities across the country.
Great, thank you. And if you haven't already, with some of your acquisitions, been dealing with foreign investors or foreign-owned companies, I would assume that's in your radar going ahead. How would you be talking to a foreign investor? What makes your firm differentiated?
Yeah, I think what's really important is for a foreign investor to sort of look at placing any of their capital, let's say with a flowing river. They need to know that we know what's happening in terms of the boots on the ground. They need to know that we at least have a sphere of influence, so that when we show up and talk about our investment thesis, that it's not something that's just out of thin air. Where we've actually lived it. We breathe this work every day. we've influenced it, we've had success, and when we deal with challenges, we're able to work through those challenges very quickly because of that level of experience. And so we're not just talking about how to look at Indigenous investment, we do it, right? And we've had that experience. And so knowing that our influence as leaders goes even beyond just being a fund manager, that we actually have the ability to influence significant government policy change as leaders. That is something that I think fund managers just don't have access to, right? Or they don't, some of the fund managers may not have the sphere of influence with customers the way that we do. So that is very unique to our approach. And so when we talk about finding success with the portfolio of companies that we'll invest in, we have a game plan in place, and we wouldn't choose something just because it looks flashy. We're choosing businesses that actually make really good sense for us, and that we have our greatest strengths working for us, and able to play into that network that we have. So I think that's what really differentiates us as new fund managers.
Thank you. And as we head into the autumn, all Canadians are expecting to see something different over the next few months in terms of how the country works together and what projects are initiated. Do you have any perspective on that you'd like to share? None of us have a crystal ball, but you're on the ground in the prairies, the heart of the country. So what's your view on?
So the big things that I'm seeing right now, obviously everyone's talking about the loan guarantees that have been committed to. I know a lot of the organizations are still working through some of their policies and approaches to how we leverage those opportunities more effectively in community. We've been having our constant conversations, because with the investments that we make, we do want First Nations to be investing alongside us, so that they can learn from our approach, and that they can someday, our hope is that, when we go out and we invest capital with our LPs, that eventually these nations will take over those investments, at a much higher ownership percentage, and be able to fully transfer that capacity over. And so I think with those opportunities, we need to be very good at what's happening in the market, which are loan guarantees. And so our team is working through those processes to ensure that when we are looking at new investment opportunities, we're also working directly with communities to bring them into the equity ownership, and have them learn for us over the next 7 to 10 years as we build a successful business together, but also look at our exit over time. And hopefully at that point, those nations are in a much better position to have stronger teams, to have the oversight, to have the management capacity, to manage those portfolios of companies in the future. So that crystal ball wise, I think just continue to monitor the loan guarantees, and it's a fantastic way for communities to actively participate in the economy, and do it at a much more substantial scale, because of the size and scale of infrastructure projects, and just because of the way that capital is moving in the markets. There's not as much capital available, especially in Western Canada right now, for things like resource sector investment. So the only way that these organizations are going to gain access to any capital is through looking at the capital that nations will be able to access through the loan guarantee program.
Personally curious, Thomas, what keeps you grounded? You've got a lot of balls in the air, but what keeps you grounded what do you like to do for fun or to as a hobby? How do you spend your spare time?
Well, we're a Powell family, and we're very involved in sports. So, all throughout the summer, if you're not seeing me in the boardroom or in meetings, on the weekends, I'm competing at Powell's across the prairies and into the US. So our family is very involved in Powell, and it's our way of grounding ourselves and just being in community. And it also helps us teach our kids a number of lessons and being able to I had this conversation with my wife actually on the drive home and the other night, and it was a very late drive home, and we were just saying, it's a very different feeling being a part of powwow, because we form relationships and we form new families with folks that are not directly connected to our bloodlines, but we create these family relationships with folks right across Indian country, and it's been very good for us as a family. And my oldest is now technically an adult, and she was powwowing for her first time on her own this summer, and we
Is
had a bit
that
of worry.
drumming or dancing?
Dancing. We all dance. But she went out on her own this summer with her boyfriend, and they went to quite a number of powwows throughout the summer. And we didn't, after the first few powwows, we didn't have to worry so much, because we had so much family out there taking care of her and making sure that she's fed and that she's braided up and feeling good about being out there. So that's what keeps us grounded, is the being part of that powwow family, and those relationships that we build, and then of course sports. My kids are all in very competitive sports, whether that's hockey, basketball. My girl's in college; she plays basketball, and my other two are in multiple sports. From hockey, I have two goalies now, and they keep us very, very busy throughout the year. So we're always in community doing the sports or powwow. So that keeps us really grounded.
Love it. We just had the Tyendinaga powwow recently, and good crowds again. The drumming, the dancing, and don't forget the food.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's always good.
Thank you, Thomas. It's been wonderful to have you on the podcast with us, and Rob and I have enjoyed the conversation very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. And hopefully we're having a regular conversation. I know there's a lot of things on the go, and as we continue to see success as Indigenous fund managers, we're always willing to share those good stories, and hopefully encourage more Indigenous individuals to move into this space. And that's all that I ask for at the end of the day, is that our young people continue to carry that torch forward, and hopefully move at even faster speeds than we can. But I know that's economic reconciliation is the it's the horse that pulls the cart, right?
Yes.
For all of the
hopefully we all see that in the future.
Absolutely.
Right, and don't have to wait 7 generations.
No.
Right.
Nope. Hopefully we can move that to 1 generation. So
yes, that'd be great.
Great to talk to you, and exciting to hear about Flowing River Capital and the exciting opportunities that are going to flow from that new enterprise.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Thomas Benjoe for sharing his insights with us. And thank you for viewing and listening. Mark your calendars for the upcoming 2026 summit taking place on the 8th of April. Be sure to share, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Thanks for listening to Drumbeats. Until next time.